and I am on the rise. Yes, indeed. I hail from the Druid city of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and I reside here in Fayetteville, Georgia, with my husband and co host, Minister Jamie Eatman. And I am indeed blessed to be in your presence this evening. Now, I'll turn it over to him.
Greetings, everyone. Peace and blessings be unto you all. As my wife, Lady Antoinette, stated, we are coming to you from Fayetteville, Georgia. I guess most would call it a home studio. I wouldn't call it that yet, but this is where we are broadcasting from. I thank you all for joining us, and it was asked earlier that you please share. Please do. And today I actually had enough time to go to the radio site, which is riseradiotr.com, and actually put a link. So if you can give them that link, they don't just have to listen. They can either cut off that headset and click on the YouTube video, or they can listen. Just depends on what they're doing. So that is their choice. We are glad that you all joined us. And not only are we on the rise, we are going to spend this time together. And during this time frame, we are going to rise. We are going to rise above life situation and circumstances. Circumstances being, had we not entered here now, nothing that's about to happen would take place. So this is a moment that we are going to rise to the occasion here with Rise to Prosperity, where we educate, motivate, and inspire individuals to rise above life situations and circumstances. We'd like to thank you all for joining us. And I'm going to give Lady Antoinette another moment, or I can proceed.
You can proceed.
Thank you very much, Lady Antoinette. As we begin to get ready for today's program, I think we did a great job last week of addressing ancestral knowledge before we actually got into the program. But I don't know if we addressed it or not. So, Lady Antoinette, I'm going to throw this question at you. If you had to define ancestral knowledge to set the stage for today's show, how would you define it?
I would define ancestral knowledge as being the information that has been handed down from generation to generation.
Okay, I like that response, and I like it for two reasons. You know, the we always want to deal in truth, and that's a true statement because the only knowledge we can possess is that which has been given to us. And I like it because wherever there's truth, if you examine it close enough, you can sometimes always see lie lurking in the background. So for those who may think that the ancestral knowledge is that we know, it is not limited to what we know. It is that knowledge that of what took place. And to prove my point, the Bible says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." Knowledge had to have occurred for that statement to be made. So the knowledge that has been passed down to us, we are grateful for. But there's some knowledge we may have missed. And not that we plan to kind of give you that, but we want to kind of stir up your thinking or your intent to the point that you might desire to know, or at least know that there is something beyond what you know or think that you know. So, having said that and asked that particular question, was there anything else that stood out about last week's program, Lady Antoinette, that would be a highlight going into tonight?
Well, we had a special guest on last week, someone who hadn't been on the panel for a while, and she shared a lot of information with us. She kept saying how blessed she was to be on the show, and that the Lord, the Spirit, kept telling her that she needed to be on the show. She needed to be on the show. And but as far as the ancestral knowledge, we talked about how was it important that we have that knowledge, and of course, yes, it is important. How important was it? And we also discussed some other things as far as um, have you has your ancestral knowledge formed your belief system or had some anything to do with your spiritualism? And of course, from those questions, you got to examine your own ancestry and some of the things that and I share it with everyone about my knowledge, the knowledge that I came into when my father, understanding at this age what his name actually meant. It was a name, like I said last week, it was a name that we really didn't understand. However, we knew that everyone knew him by that nickname. And in looking at a show from Africa, that word came up and they explained the word. And it was like an eye opener. So, a lot of time, and my dad did say, I asked him one time, I said, Dad, what are they saying? And he told me, and then I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. I said, what? He said, it's supposed to be Manu. And I was thinking, Manu. I was like, that don't make any sense. So he knew what they were saying, but sometimes as um, we tend to take nicknames and we make them whatever we want to make them. However they sound, that's what they end up being. So he did tell me one time that it was Manu. And so when I heard that name, of course, on the show, they explained what it was, and I was just thrown aback, and I informed my family because none of us knew exactly what was going on. So stuff like that we talked about. So we had a chance to talk about some of our own ancestral knowledge that we've come to know and learn, and how it's important that we remember our ancestral knowledge and keep hold of it, because that knowledge can take you, I think, further than book knowledge, because there are things that you actually just learn um, in common sense and the way that they did things. Then you come to learn why they did things that way. So I think it's very important. Well, we discussed how important that was.
Okay. I like that. All right. Well, and thank you for giving us that information again concerning the menu. There's a lot of references and even nicknames have been passed down that may be
Mhm.
that same way. It may have
Right.
some basis or premises or some meaning that we don't even know. We're just doing
Mm-mm.
it because it's done. It's just there.
Yes.
So as we move forward with the program, that's somewhat of a general overview, and I would add to that that as we dealt with the program, we asked some questions that are going to be similar to some of the questions we asked tonight, but we reworded them slightly. Anytime we don't finish a program and we go back, we try to keep it in the same vein. So if the question sounds similar, make sure you pay attention to what's really being asked because it's a different perspective or spin on it. And Sister Deborah, I would like to ask you if you're there, if you give us your definition. I don't know if you were there with us last week or not, but your definition of ancestral knowledge. Ancestral knowledge is a interesting topic, and the more I think about it, the more appropriate it seems. We live in a society today where education is so important. If you can believe it, it was thought that education is very important and that it impacts a society. And a society is subject to, uh, I guess, progressing or either setbacks based on the knowledge of its people. And knowledge is different from experience because the things that we're talking about is ancestral knowledge. Our ancestors actually experienced. That was wisdom. Those were lessons of life. And if we have that knowledge, then we will never have the experience, but the knowledge is something that will serve us, and it will use us. If I mean, it will serve us if we will use it. So here we are now looking at this topic of ancestral knowledge, and it's very important because when you think about something as simple as a statement that's so simple as "My people perish for lack of knowledge." And when you think about that, it didn't say "My people perish for ancestral knowledge." It says "My people perish for lack of knowledge." So the question, big question, would be, who is being referred to as my people, and what knowledge is it that they are lacking? And that would be a great question. But unfortunately, the answer to that, unless we put forth some effort and really pursue to find out, the answer to that is going to be I don't know. And as long as the answer is I don't know, that means that we remain ignorant. And as long as we're ignorant, it already tells us what happens. Ignorance, not knowing, perish, lack of knowledge. So, not that we are about to give you that knowledge. We want to stir up that that's within you so that you will go about attempting to pursue or find that knowledge. All right. Sister Deborah says, and Sister Deborah, thank you for responding. I have to apologize for having to leave the program before the end, but I was there for part of the program. I believe that our ancestors had passed down a lot of knowledge and experiences. That is true. That's true. And if our ancestors passed down a lot of knowledge and experiences, I guess the question would be at that point, um, what happened to it? Because there's a lot of knowledge and experience that we are lacking. And if we are lacking knowledge and experience, the question becomes why? What happened to it? There's some things that are going on in society today that just are not just. And I'll give you a prime example. I heard something on the news where a person made a statement and they held him accountable for the statement. And he should have been held accountable for the statement, but I don't know if he should have gone to the extreme with which it was taken. I don't know what the person said, but someone referenced what he said as being a hate statement. In other words, that he was stirring up hatred. There was another term they had to it. But I think you all get what I'm about to get at. When a person talks about knowledge or shares something, it's going to carry a certain thought or a certain impact. If you've ever been in a room where someone made a statement and the room went silent, it wasn't because the person asked them to be quiet. It was because something about what that person said, it commanded so much respect, or it demanded so much attention that no one was able to respond, or no one did respond. Some might have been able to respond while others might have not. But when things like that happen, you can assume that the person that spoke had more knowledge than those who were unable to speak, or they spoke louder than those people that were unable to speak. So we're talking about knowledge here, and anytime you talk about knowledge, there's another word that you have to touch on, and that word is ignorance. Because one of the things that prevents knowledge from going forward is ignorance. A person could be presenting, making a great presentation, and someone comes up and make a statement. Statement may not be true. They might even make a joke, make something humorous, do something just distracts away from what the person's doing. And if that person doesn't choose to return to what they were doing, that means whatever knowledge they had or were about to give is no longer passed on, or you gonna walk away without it. So we have to be careful of the people around us, because when it comes to knowledge, it's not something to be uh, made a joke of. It's not something to be taken lightly. So you want to make sure you're in the right setting when it comes down to acquiring knowledge. And if you're passing on that knowledge, know that there is going to always be something that's going to oppose the knowledge that you may be attempting to pass on. So I like Sister Deborah's answer, and it's kind of in keeping with Lady Antoinette's, that she believes that our ancestors passed down a lot of knowledge and experience. And there was a lot of knowledge and experience passed down. So I guess what I'm about to say would be considered hate, whatever, as well. But I believe in knowledge. I believe in accountability. I believe in taking responsibility. So what I'm going to say is this: there was a knowledge that people that were brought here in slavery had. And because when they were brought here, it wasn't desirable, the knowledge wasn't desirable as the labor. So there was this intentional process to destroy that knowledge or prevent that knowledge from being passed on. Now, not that I was there and saw this, but when I look at the brutality of what took place, I believe this, that there were instances where people's tongues were cut out so they could not teach the language of their language to their children or their descendants. And so, therefore, the statement that Sister Deborah made was valid. Lady Antoinette's statement was valid, but knowledge can be lost, it can be taken away. So when you think about what we're talking about today, you can actually say we really don't know all of what we're talking about because there's some things that we don't know. But I would just want to stir up the interest and open our thoughts to the point that knowledge, they say knowledge is power. Knowledge is only potential power. It's like anything else. You can have keys and not know how to drive. Car sitting out there, and it still does you no good until you know what to do with it. So our program today deals with that knowledge, ancestral knowledge. And Sister Deborah gave us another comment. She said, if you read that, Lady Antoinette.
Sister Deborah says it gets pushed to the back burner like other things in life if no one continues to pass on the lessons and information.
Correct. I like that. Any comments on that, Lady Antoinette?
Nope,
That
she's
statement?
correct.
Okay.
She's correct.
Not only is she correct, and I gave this analogy about how what was done when the people were brought here as far as slavery goes. But it's sad because today, if you look at it, and you all can tell me if you agree or not, I have stood at a point in time where I looked at my uncles. I stand at a point in time where I look at my children and I look at my grandchildren. And the thing that's most consistent is change. There's always change. But with that change, what I notice is that the things that are of more valuable and of more worth, it tends to diminish. It tends to get lost. Uh, it filters away with each generation. And I don't know if that's something that is just time driven. Is time as an element. I don't know if that's something that's driven by the enemy. And when I say the enemy, those things that oppose truth, be it the people that pass those lies on, people that intentionally are deprive people of the knowledge or whatever. But there's a decline as you start to look at it. And if you don't believe this, I want you to think, have you ever heard or ever said, when I was coming up, we didn't or we couldn't? Have you ever heard that, Lady Antoinette? Regardless of what the statement was that came behind it, have you ever heard those that is a preference to someone's statement?
No.
How about you, Sister Deborah? You can share with us in text. Have you
Mhm.
ever heard that statement, when I was coming up? And Lady Antoinette, I love the way you said no so quickly like that. I'm hoping that it was just your prompt response. But when you look at life, people look at children, and the children are less disciplined. The fact that maybe because parents weren't allowed to discipline their children when they were disciplined in the past, which meant that there was a degree of discipline that was exercised when there was discipline. And get what I'm saying? The children that were disciplined had discipline, and the children that were not were more prone to lack discipline. So when speaking reference to those children and our time, my mama would have never, we couldn't do that, or we did that. There are all sort of statements that point out that there's a difference in the way one generation was raised compared to the next. And Sister Deborah chimed in, and her comment was, "Yes, I have." I wish we had like maybe at least five people and we could do a consensus of how many of those five have. But I think that most would, most people I know, when I hear them, those type conversations, it's always an acknowledgement that something has gone wrong, that something has been missed, or that something was not passed on. So that something that was missed or that something was not passed on, it is a knowledge. Or it may be, and actually it is a knowledge, because even when we were disciplined, that passed on a knowledge. So minus that, that's knowledge in a sense, discipline, rearing, upbringing, or whatever, that is lost. So um, I just wanted to throw that in there. Lady Antoinette, did you have anything you want to add to that?
Yes, I did. And the reason I said no was because growing up, I grew up in a very religious family. So a lot of the things that we didn't do um, was due to one, religious beliefs. And then, so that's why I said no. And but I do agree that the way we were raised. Okay, my mom was a disciplinarian in my home. My father was real laid back. He only disciplined when you did something very, very bad. And it could have been like talking back. So I think I got a whipping once for trying to having something to say back to what he told me. That was one time, and that was enough. So as a child, I never talked back. That was just me. I think I just so um and that's why I said no because of that. It was I did basically a lot of things. There were times when I did get disciplined, but they were for things like not being a bad child, not talking back. They were for things like I mentioned the other day, forgetting things. My mom would tell me to do something, or I had to go to church and I couldn't find things. I'd lose things. They weren't important to me, and I never kept up with them. But and because I didn't, my mom would be like, "Okay, you're throwing us late for church, so when you get home, or tonight, you're gonna get a whipping," stuff like that. But it wasn't from for being a bad child. It was from just little things that I did, little, you know, forgetting things and all of that. But it wasn't for talking back. It wasn't for rolling my eyes. It wasn't for raising my voice. It was never for anything like that. I can't hear you.
Check your system,
You
Antoinette.
now. I can hear you now.
Okay. Sister Deborah wrote, can you read that, please?
Yes. She writes, I feel like the weaker and wiser statement comes into play due to the kids having too much access to electronics and not enough one on one conversation with other children. I agree.
Hmm.
I
Okay.
totally agree.
And I think that also could include us with our children.
Mhm.
Um, Sister Deborah, Sister Joanne just came in. Greetings, Sister Joanne. I
Greetings,
think
peace and blessings.
I think Sister Deborah is right on the money. That's one of the things that if you look at, most people can remember the black and white TV before it became color.
Mhm.
You can remember when the computers came about and how that was one of the things that a certain generation, even when it came about, didn't bother with, and another generation just learned enough to get by. And now the children are exposed to it in such a manner that we use it to entertain them. We use it to occupy them, to raise them. As a matter of fact, if you can imagine the way children used to cry, we would get a pacifier and stick it in their mouth. The TV is a pacifier. It has pacified our children. We've used it for that reason. So
Mhm.
now what they were learning, that which was given to them, that knowledge, subliminal, or however you like to think of it, it is manifesting itself. And I guess you might say a change in culture, a change in behavior, across the board. So I agree, with my sister. I think that's right on point there. And that one-on-one conversation, the value system, if left unchecked, it's going to develop. As Lady Antoinette says, how I make the statement about if I'm doing something wrong, I'm going to do it wrong to the best of my abilities. Well, if you use that same thought process in your children doing something wrong and they don't know anything better, they're going to do that, practice that until such time as you teach them something else or until such time as you correct them. And one of the best means of correcting them, uh, I can say in my day, was a rod of correction. But now, children doesn't don't get that as much. If you think about, the fact of getting a whooping in school, used to be a time when you could be disciplined in school for your behavior. Now I went to, my grandson's school and took him into a room and prepared to discipline him. The lady almost tore the door down, saying that that was against the policy there. So there's a lot that comes into play, but we need to know that it comes with a consequence. And Sister Deborah asked, the computer has now become the babysitter.
Mhm.
I agree. And unfortunately, that's not the wisest or the best babysitter that we could have used. All right. Thank you, Sister Deborah. I look forward to your continued contribution. And you
Amen.
as well, Sister Joanne. Lady Antoinette, do you have any additional comments?
Yeah.
If there are no additional comments, we're going to go ahead and get into tonight's program. As I told you, some of the questions were slightly modified. I'll let you know which ones they were. And we are looking for your input here in the room as well. And if you haven't gone through StreamYard, we may not see your comments, but please enter them because when you're done and someone comes back later, they may be able to see those comments. And that might be a good thing to help some. We have Sister Crystal. She's right on time. She comes in with her pleasant good evening. Greetings, my
Welcome.
sister. Peace and
Welcome,
blessings
Apostle.
be unto you. Okay, Lady Antoinette, if you can bring up the first question here. This first question is a interesting one. I'm hoping that you all will find it interesting. Um, you can make your answer as simple as a yes or no for those of you who are in the discussion room. And Lady Antoinette and I will definitely elaborate on ours. So, the first question is, do you believe that ancestral knowledge is confrontational? Do you believe it to be confrontational? Lady Antoinette, why or
Yes,
why
I
not?
I do believe it to be confrontational because a lot of things, the way the world is today, there are a lot of conversations that need to be had. there needs to be an understanding. People are afraid of what they don't understand, and because of that, there needs to be people need to be confronted on why you don't understand. What is it that we? How can we make you understand? Or if there anything any information we can give you, any what questions do you have? That is, yes, that's why I think it's confrontational. Not confrontational at a point where out of anger, although at some point it can and has been in the past. But I don't look at it as being confrontational in an angry kind of way. But just the point being made that, I am African American or of the Negroid, you know, uh, race. And so I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to um, act a little differently. My voice is going to be different. My hair is going to be different. There are things that are just going to be different about me. And those things should not appear as being bad or negative. So that's why I think certain things you need to confront some things as far as your ancestral knowledge.
Okay, well said. And Sister Crystal Harris writes, "It can be, but it doesn't have to be."
Exactly.
And that's kind of what you were saying, Lady Antoinette.
Mhm.
Now, Lady Antoinette, you agree with that statement. How might it not be? What might prevent it from being? Is it the
W
time of day you discuss it? Is the people you discuss it with? What are
No.
some of the things that might prevent this from being confrontational?
Something that would prevent it would be what they call a meeting of the minds. Um, when people realize that there has to be a conversation in order to cut down on some things that will make this a negative issue. So we don't want this to be something negative. We want it to be something positive, something that we can grow on, something that we can move forward on. And so we need people who want to move forward, who want to discuss, get an understanding, and move forward together um, as a unit, as move forward to get things done. That's a way that we can make it non confrontational.
Okay, I like the way you said that, Lady Antoinette. And Sister Deborah says, yes, because of different ways of people thinking from what was and what is today. From what was and what is today. I love that statement there. And I'm going to throw this out there. I did an interview during I don't even know what to call them, but when there was the emotional um, matter going on when the they had killed our brother in the streets, the police officers. I interviewed a young man, and we were talking about um, what had happened. And as I watched what was going on, I was really impressed with him because he was very vocal. But even with his vocalness, it only showed me or confirmed for me my suspicions that there was more emotionalism than there were purpose. When you're going to do something, it has to have a purpose behind it. And I'm getting at the point of people's thinking the way it was and the way it is today. When you look at the taking to the streets during the time frame when all the hype was there, when all the media was there. Someone made a comment that if a news person put a camera in some of those people's face and asked them what did they want, there wouldn't be anything said because there was no real intent behind what they were doing. And I'm saying that to say this: there is a big difference in what was and what is today. And that becomes very important because confrontation, Lady Antoinette, it can occur because, regardless of how you look at it, the things that the masses may want may not be righteous. They may not be correct. So, because that's what the masses want, the people who are believers, if they are not confrontational, and I don't mean in a sense of fighting, but in the sense of calling a lie, that's confrontation. Looking at history and that's not true, this is really what happened. Or the fact that someone wants to omit something. All of those are means of confrontation. So when I think of confrontation in that sense, it's kind of hard to see a way around it. And Sister Crystal says, depending on how you confront it. That's the key right there. In the matter of confronting something, it has to, the Bible says, come, let us reason together. The Bible says the word of God is good for reproof, correction, instruction, exaltation. All those are means of confrontation. And I think the best way to make it less confrontational, it isn't even in the person that's doing the confrontation. It's going to deal more with the person that's being confronted. If we're involved in a communication or exchange of information, then we should be listening and we should be communicating for effect. And if we're doing those two things, that means that I heard you, you heard me. And somewhere in our dialogue, there should be something uh, that's going to be productive, even if it's nothing but, as the Bible says, know those that labor among you. If I know this person to be this way, and I've spoke with them and I've attempted to correct them or whatever, and this person has assured me that this is who I am and this is what I'm going to do, I can't change them, but I do know who I'm dealing with now. I do know the spirit that this person carry. And likewise, they might assume that about me. But without that confrontation taking place, you don't know. You don't know who is to your right. You don't know who is to your left. And people have often done things in what they thought was a unified manner, only to be confronted, there goes that word again, with something that's a challenge. And everybody that was supposed to have been a part of that is now going these different ways, have these different thoughts because they never were actually unified to begin with. So I think confrontation is very important. Our question was, do you believe that ancestral knowledge is confrontational? Why or why not? I believe it's confrontational because it presents, uh, it can actually present opposing views. For example, America. The best way to look at this, let's look at it from another country. There was this country, and there were like Polish and someone else, these two people, and they had to teach history. They had a problem because one country was victorious and the other country had lost a war. So when they started to write history, there was a question of whose perspective would it have been written from. And I use those two countries to say this: at least those two countries had their own independent histories, and it was just a question of how they were going to write the book. But when you look at what took place here in the United States and you look at history, it's a whole different story because in war, somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. But when you look at what took place here in the United States, there's a disgust, there's a shame that's associated with it. And until people can embrace that shame, it gets to be a problem with trying to uh, combine the two because most people aren't going to let you. And if you teach one without the other, then that's going to be some ism, racism, or whatever you want to call it. And when you teach them together, the challenge is doing it truthfully. And that's what is confronting America right now in this education system. There's been some shameful acts and deeds that, in order to bring them out, they would say this person is teaching hate. But there's a Malcolm X, I think he stated that there's a hate that hate begot. So, in order to teach the truth, or to teach the ancestral knowledge, unfortunately, it has to be kept within each group there, because that's the only way the truth is going to be taught. And what is taught in the classrooms has to be something that's representative of what actually took place, because it's been said, no lie can live forever. So here we are now. We're talking about a topic, ancestral knowledge. But if you see all the areas of life that it veers into, it opens some eyes. It creates some challenges. It causes some confrontation. And the best way that, or the best thing we can hope for as a result of that, is when we get done with our communication, we realize where we are, and we realize how we got here. And if truth has its way, then love will come into play.
Mhm.
Love covers a multitude of sin. But minus that love, minus that truth, it leads to a frustrating confrontation with the continued lies. And that's a big challenge, getting beyond the lies. I remember this story, and I'm going to read Sister Crystal's comments after this.
Mhm.
But I remember this story where it started off with Lie being in a pool, inviting Truth to join him. Truth took off a garment. Now, people are known by their garments. Truth took off his garments to get in the pool. Lie got out, put on Truth's garment, and continued Truth's journey. So, which meant that here's Lie dressed up, going about looking like the Truth. And the reality of that story, which will always stick with me, is this: you have to undress the truth or the lie, dressed in truth. I didn't even look at it, but that garment has to come off to reveal the naked truth. It's not enough now to have a little bit of truth in it. It has to be the naked truth. Because when it's the naked truth, you can call it like it is. You can judge it properly. You can condemn it properly. But that's only when you can get at the truth. Sister Crystal shares.
Sister Crystal writes, it also depends on where you're coming from or where you have grown up. I'm from the North and my husband is from the South. So I didn't have to deal with the things he had to deal with. My family is very mixed ancestral and it's our normal.
Okay. And that is the story for a lot of people. And I love the way she said that.
Mhm.
It's our normal. And the reality of that is, if you look at that mix, even how that mix came about, there's a history behind it.
Mhm.
And that history, regardless of who stands here, who's here now, ancestors were involved. And ancestors had a journey for us to get to the point we're at today. And that's the knowledge that we're talking about. And when we look at that knowledge, it, as Sister Crystal stated, she embraces that because of the reality of it. And that is a fact. In order to embrace that reality, you have to know how it got this way. because otherwise you're looking at something that has a life of its own, that has an existence of its own, but that existence is tied to the other things and other people around him. No man is an island unto himself. Regardless of where we find ourselves today, there was a point where certain things go back. There's a point where they connect. There's a point where certain things weren't even in existence. God called them into being. When you know that history, you know that knowledge, you can understand, appreciate, and even love it better. But when it's something that, if you can imagine, uh, I know this happens from people down south when they go places like joining the military, and they go and they learn some truths that they didn't know, or they actually learn something not that they didn't know, they've been living it all this time, but they see now, their eyes are open, they're no longer blind to it. All those things occur, and people can better relate and better understand and get to a point, like Sister Crystal just said, her family is very mixed ancestral, and they're normal. You only get to that point when you embrace the reality of where you are, who you are, and why you are. And that's what I'm getting at here, that truth and that knowledge. That's how you get there. That's how you get to that point of acceptance, until you have actually kind of thought that through. Because otherwise, when you encounter truth, it can leave you disgruntled, it can leave you angry, it can leave you confused. That's why the knowledge is so important. Okay, did you have anything additional, Lady Antoinette?
No,
Sister
I don't.
Crystal, thank you for sharing that. And that's one of those things, the North and the South, the different mindsets, the different way that we were raised, the
Mhm.
way we think differently. It's amazing. It's amazing. That's could go deeper, but we're gonna stop there. It might come out in another question. Okay, but go ahead, Lady Antoinette.
Okay.
Second question says, how might ancestral knowledge influence or impact the world spiritually? Our question last week was, how might it impact your life, or the world? But we added a word there, spiritually. So this word spiritually changes some things. So let's see what the answers are. And Sister Crystal and Sister Deborah, if y'all still with us, I want to hear y'all's answer. How might ancestral knowledge influence or impact the world spiritually? Lady Antoinette.
Well, I feel that it would influence or impact the world spiritually by how well, we're talking spiritually, so of course, how we worship. And, there's a saying that the most segregated day of the week is Sunday. And, and that's true. Some people can see that it may be getting better in their church, or there may be some mixed race churches. However, the majority are not. So when you speak spiritually, we all serve the same God, supposedly the same God, the one who made heaven and earth. And however, we seek to be with our own, um, because of some things that we have obtained, we have learned, we have um, possessed ancestrally, our music, certain things, sometimes the preaching. So those things, as a people, I think we kind of look to be with people who share the same, as far as that kind of like mindedness, and that's probably why there's a big um, vast, uh, what am I trying to say? That amount of segregation on Sunday morning. So spiritually, uh, yes, it has impacted. It has influenced because of the differences. Not that not that we're better, or to say that I worship at this church because this church is better than that church, or this church is better than that. Not because of that. It's just a preference, I would say, because of the ancestral knowledge.
Okay. Nobody has entered any text in the room, so I'll give you this before I give you my answer. You said some things that just want to clarify. I think they said segregated is what's the term to use, right? Most segregated.
Mhm.
Okay, and that term doesn't necessarily is not limited solely to racism, because if you think about it, that would just be so many white churches and so many black. That term goes to religion as well, because you got Protestant, you got Baptist, you got AME, you got UMC, you got all these different denominations as well.
Mhm.
So all these people are going to do their thing separate of each other. So when you look at it from that perspective, that I think that's more of what that statement alludes to, in the fact that it should be a oneness, be it the fact of one claiming to be um, a believer, a one in Christ. If you think about it, one body, many members. So that would eliminate that segregation, that would desegregate in a sense, but it does not. So that's only to address the portion that you gave there. Sister Crystal did chime in with, go ahead.
She writes, "We should love one another. It doesn't matter about our ancestral difference. God is love. If we look at it from spiritual outlook."
Okay, I like that.
Mhm.
Sister Deborah chimes in with,
Sister Deborah says, "I feel like it would impact the world spiritually by the way we worship today compared to how and where our ancestors did, and how to worship compared to our choices today. But we all still worship the same God. At least I hope so."
okay, okay, okay. I like that, the way that you all took the spiritually to the way we worship.
Mhm.
When Jesus had a conversation with Nicodemus, and he said, "You must be born again." He wasn't talking religion.
Mhm.
When he said to him about, he gave him an example about the wind and how the wind goes where it's listed. I think that was the term, the way it was worded, and that was what the spirit was. The spirit is in that manner. So when I make reference to that spiritually, there's some spiritual things that, if you look at supposedly religion and the people that were supposed to be, what do they call it? They call them, well, they weren't even supposed to be civilized. They had a way of worshiping everything before they even encountered people here in America. As a matter of fact, there was a song, I don't know if it's Amazing Grace or one of the most major songs, but it was supposed to have been a song that came from the slaves that they sang before they were even brought into captivity. I love what Sister Crystal said about the God isn't a God of race or whatever the case may be. That is true, and I would add to that, he wasn't that when they came and enslaved us as a people. So when we look at that, there's a lot of things that we have to look at. That's one way that it would have impacted the world, because had they not been and I'm going to use the word savages, and came and enslaved a people that they defined as beasts, and all those years denied them the thought of being human, then if you look at that from that perspective, the spiritual aspect of it would have been that it would have been just and God would have been acknowledged, and we wouldn't have had that. But where God is absent, or that spirituality was absent, there left a carnality, or depending on what book you read, a bestiality. There's a lot of things that, religion wise, when you study it, how it uses certain terms to show where man was distant from God. And we're at a term today where I use the term spiritually, which you all equate to man being close to God. I use that term to imply if we had acted more in a spiritual manner than a carnal one. The Bible speaks of fruits of the spirit and fruits of the flesh. If you think about the fruits of the spirit, there's no way we would even be having the conversation concerning the different isms. We'd still have the different ancestries because it is a fact that this person is the ancestor of this person. Today, unfortunately, people are getting so caught up in this DNA thing to the point that even what they knew to be whatever or thought to be whatever, depending on what they're going to embrace, there's going to be even more lines of division that are going to be caused to separate. But when we look at it from a perspective of how might ancestral knowledge influence, impact the world spiritually, I think that if everyone had a knowledge of where they came from and how they got here, I think it would make a big difference spiritually. Because I remember something that was said to me or that I heard, and it was something, if you look at the civil rights era, you'll see this. You'll see the fact that it had to be proven that they were intelligent as white children to get into white schools. It had to be proven that that someone was this in order to do that. That they were as good as actors, they were as good at this, as good as that. Before all these doors open. So when those doors open and the people began to walk in, it started to change things. But the fact that all that had to take place, here's the key. Ancestral. This is, well, it's another question that comes behind this. But if I look at my ancestry and my knowledge of my ancestors, it's going to show me one avenue. And if another people look at theirs, it's going to show them another avenue. And to look at it realistically, the common avenue answers the question, answers this question: where do we go from here? That's the common avenue. I like what Sister Crystal said. Go ahead.
Sister Crystal writes, there is no color, not black or white. It's naturally, uh, it's where you came from.
Okay. And I'm Sister Crystal. I'm going to let that stand. Um, but there's some truth to that, but then it's broader than that, because if you look at where people came from, there's a group of people that was spread throughout the world. Until they were spread throughout, they weren't there, or they may have been there in smaller numbers. But there's just certain things, when you get into the history and so forth. There's a saying that history best rewards all research. But as far as that spiritual context, black or white really doesn't come into play spiritually. But when I threw in the comment about ancestral knowledge, there's no way around it, because your ancestors go back to your ancestors. There's certain things, ancestry. Here's an example. When Jesus was going about and he was speaking, and there was someone that he was speaking to who proclaimed that his historic, um, heritage, a genealogy that went back to Father Abraham.
Mhm.
And I think he was told that Abraham wasn't his father, that Satan was his father. because if Abraham was his father, I don't remember exactly how he worded it. There was a couple of places, but basically what he was saying is that one of those stones could become a son of Abraham. So it's really spiritual, but at the same time, there's is a degree of the I guess the race. I hate to call it what it's been called because they race was made to be race. Originally, it was people. When God said, "My people who are called by my name," He distinguished a people, and that was before Jesus came. So we wasn't talking about Christians. Um, but then anyway, we're gonna go on beyond that portion, unless someone has a comment in the room. We will deal with that if need
Mhm.
be. But that is the response. That I look at for that. Spiritually, if we had been more spiritual minded, that would be the most important thing. And I think if we're going to get where we're supposed to be with the right mind and the right um, destination, we're going to have to do it with the right spirit. And when the Bible speaks of one spirit, it isn't a racial spirit, it's the spirit of God. So even when we tell our story, our testimonies, it's going to come back to how we got to where we are. And it's still going to be different depending on what people are there. Okay. What does the script say? Read that again. There's no color, not black or white. It's natural to where we come from and tied to nationality. I think that's what she meant. But no problem. And you're right, Sister Crystal. I understood what you were saying the first time. Okay. And I think that's a part of the problem with the history books. When little question conversations like that come open,
Mhm.
it requires some dealing with the subject, some actually confronting those questions and issues.
Mhm.
And she said she was trying to say nationality.
Mhm.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Mhm.
It's come where you from, your nationality, right? Okay, I got you.
Right.
And all that becomes important. That word spirituality. There's no getting around it. But the other half of it, ancestral knowledge. God said, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." If his people are the ones perish and the others are not, then there's something different about his people and the other people. So somewhere in there, there's something we're missing that we need to make sure we try to get back or become aware of. All right, Lady Antoinette, what do we have next?
All right. Question number 3.
Okay, how might ancestral knowledge influence one's faith or belief system? We've kind of touched on that to a degree,
Mhm.
but go ahead, Lady Antoinette. Before you
Yeah.
do, Sister Crystal says we must study to show thyself approved unto God, workmen who need not be ashamed. Going back to what's that word I used earlier? Rightly dividing
The
the
word of
word of
God
truth.
of truth. Mhm.
And God's word is truth. The word of truth. Go ahead, Lady Antoinette.
Okay. As far as influencing one's faith or belief system, you're right. We kind of went over that a few minutes ago when we were talking about, worshiping together. Um, and it does kind of depending on what you are depending on what you feel will feed your spirituality. It may take you being in a church or a congregation that has more ties to your ancestral knowledge, your ancestry, than it would for you to be amongst a congregation that does not. So, um, that is one way it will, influence one's belief system.
Okay. All right. Interesting response. You used the term um, about worshiping as it pertains to one's ancestry. As you were speaking, what occurred to me, tell me Does this person sounds like a person of color or a person that's not? The ancestors. Could you just distinguish who would make that comment? Could both people, races, nationalities make that comment?
Both could make them, any nationality could make them. It
Okay,
just
so
depends on who's actually in touch with their ancestry and who knows enough about their ancestry to know. Um, and, and when you dig and you've learned a lot about your ancestry and it intrigues you to learn more about your ancestry, then when you get around people, you will tend to make statements like that.
okay. My intent with the statement goes deeper than that.
Mhm,
If I said the ancestors, I could say the ancestors cause great difficulty for we, our descendants. And I could be talking about both the slaves and the slave masters.
mhm,
So when the word ancestry doesn't belong to any particular one, but when a
mhm.
person studies his ancestry, he needs to have ancestry knowledge. To say the ancestors, because just as though um, I'm standing here with my white brother or sister, and we're standing here trying to make sense of why we are here and the world is in the shape it's in, we can say that it was the ancestors. And when we start looking at our ancestry, I got to look at a point where there were slaves, and he got to look at a point where there might have been slave owners. So at that point, we have our individual ancestry, but the ancestors are those who came before those who are present. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. However, when you made that comment, to be honest, the person or nationality that I thought of that would use that and still use it are the Native Americans. They are truly one who still seek their ancestors. Everything they do is for their ancestors. Uh, so that's the first when you made that statement. The first nationality I thought about were the Native Americans.
And that's a fair point, but
Mhm,
our show is about ancestry knowledge.
mhm.
And would it make sense to say that they're probably the ones that's more in contact with the knowledge of their ancestors? That's the question, Lady Antoinette.
You know what? I think so, because see, we've just started in the past, uh, when Ancestry.com first came out. That's when we all everybody got on the bandwagon for wanting to know about their ancestry, and then you had, Dr. uh, Gates came out with the show about your knowing your ancestry, and so then all of a sudden it became a big fad. Everybody wanted to know where they were from. However, the Native Americans, they could probably tell you where they're from, how they migrated, where they migrated from. They would be because it's I think with them it's pertinent. It's pertinent that they know.
Hmm.
Um, so we know, and we know through what we've been through, and but hey, I can only go back so far. And right now, I wish I could go further, and it'll probably take more. But I would love to go further in my ancestry. But right now, it seems like I may have hit a brick wall. However, I would like to know more. And some people they have gotten further along than I have. So, but still, when you first said that, I knew what you were really uh, meaning. What you were meaning as far as we are concerned, and the slaves and the slave owners. However, when you made that statement, however, the first nationality I thought about were the Native Americans, because they still talk about ancestry. They still hold uh, uh, ancestry, yearly ancestry bonding things, and different things they have to go through, um, because of their ancestry.
You know, I like the way you said that, but it's not a family reunion, an event that some people hold annually.
Yes, it is. But how many people actually go to the family reunion?
No, but my point is, we're talking about um, knowledge, ancestral knowledge. The availability or the lack of it doesn't change it. It's still there. And when you think about the things that you said I used an example that was about slaves and slave owners. I used that for a reason because there's a one can't really tell his history without the other.
Hmm.
America could never tell its history without its slaves. And a person here today really couldn't tell his history, especially if it came up through slavery. And the truth be told, we're a big part, both white and black, of the Native Americans' history. But my point is, when we talk about ancestral knowledge, I don't want to limit it to black and white. An ancestor is an ancestor. When the uh, concept of ancestors, when I made that comment earlier, and I said the ancestors did this, I was speaking to anyone standing at this point in time and saying ancestors, and they're referring to those of the past. When we get into tracing our ancestry, it's where we will go down the different avenues. And I really wasn't even thinking ancestry.com because what you said about the that starting there, that's far from correct. If you remember the Black National Anthem, you hear about how that was something that children had to learn in school. So that goes back, and one of the biggest things it says, it speaks of our motherland, or I don't know the exact wording, but that's close. But it's acknowledging ancestry. It's going back. So that's kind of been there, but to what intent, or what degree, may have been what's in question. But when I asked the question earlier about the spirituality, the role the spiritual aspect was played. If you think about even that song, how far back it goes, what did it stir? What did it keep alive? What did it revive? What did it sow? What did it plant? What did it water? That's a form of spirituality as well. So hold on a second. I think Sister Crystal has something here. Well, let me see what she says. Yes, they teach their children about their ancestors, Native American. A lot of families do teach their children about their ancestors, or a lot of families, since you used the word don't, teach their children about their ancestors. And believe it or not, I don't know if you all would agree with this, but a lot of people, children today, are ashamed of their ancestry to a degree. If you think about the thing that's fronting our education system about teaching history here in America, you got to tell two stories that neither one wants to hear. So when you look at that, think about our education system now. They don't want to teach this. And because they've had this class all this time where they didn't put any thought into it, and now someone looked at it and said, well, this needs to be in there. They want to throw away the whole thing because they don't want to put that in there. Because now it wasn't enough that you got to look at my house on the outside. You now want to come in. and there might be all these things inside here that I wouldn't want seen. I wouldn't want to be known. Not only that, now you want to look in the closets, all the skeletons,
Mm.
all the things that for years we might have talked about at home. Those are the things now that are at the forefront. And if you don't want that taught, and now here's this people waking up and they want more of this history about themselves and they want it taught in school. But if you teach their history, how can you teach their history without teaching the other history? So truth now stares us in the face. Are we ready for it? So the question becomes, if you look at what's going on in the news and you listen to what's being said about what they don't want taught in school versus what they are teaching, they can teach classes about homosexuality, how children should know this and that. They got curriculums already prepared. But now when they want to get at the truth and modify curriculum or introduce a curriculum, that's not thought to be desirable because of the divide that it can potentially cause. This goes back to what I was saying earlier about, as Sister Crystal said, that hers is mix and that's their norm. Until it becomes a norm and truth becomes a known, it's going to be a problem. So we're dealing with a topic here that we don't really get the significance of. As earlier, we wanted to make this spiritual thing about faith. And if we look at what is going on, faith, this is the same people and that actually had a God, stripped of that God, came here, we found a God, introduced to a God, whatever the case may be. But the truth is the truth. All these things are a part of where we're at. And I remind you all what Frederick Douglass said. Frederick Douglass said that to think that we should die out or ever be driven out is absurd. We shall go with this people either as a testimony against them or for them. And that statement he made may have been a racial one, but I'll say this. Today, we live in a society where it isn't just white people. This isn't just a white and black issue.
Mhm.
This is an issue where that deals with righteousness and unrighteousness. This is an issue that deals with people who are willing to deal with what's moral and what's not. This is a issue that deals with people who are sold out to finance, sold out to other issues that would take them on this side or that side of the racial lines. What used to be race ain't race no more. There's some greater issues than race. So the ancestral knowledge I'm referring to, it just teaches us how we got here. And the better we understand that, the better we'll be able to move forward. The better we'll be able to serve ourselves. If we want to go separate, as some are asking to do, we can do so freely. If we want to stay here, as Frederick Douglass alluded to, we can do so freely. But it needs to be done with a good conscience. And the people today, they say that there's so many psychological issues going on in the world today. And I know for sure here in the United States, there is a whole lot of them. And the more truth comes out, lie is going to drive some people crazy until they start to embrace the truth. In other words, as we become more informed, as we become more knowledgeable, we're either going to embrace the truth and live somewhat of a normal, adjusted life, or we're going to try to cling to the lie and cause havoc. And who knows what actually might end up resulting as things move forward. No lie can live forever. As Krista Harris said, the truth is a lie, it's the truth. That is the truth. A lie is a lie. And a lie No lie can live forever. If you just think about a people that supposedly were robbed of their language and everything else, and here they stand. As a matter of fact, if you think about people that were here before white people arrived, now supposedly going through the process to try to sue and get back their land. It's like truth crushed to earth will rise again. And in order for it to rise, truth has a voice and it has to cry out. Somebody has to hear it. So, ancestral knowledge is that voice. We need to hear it. We need to hear the ancestors, hear from them either way. All right, Lady Antoinette, you have anything else with that one?
That will be it. Did you show Sister Deborah's comment? I'm trying
What
to
was that?
think. The ancestor said to me that one.
Oh, no, so go ahead.
Okay. The ancestors to me uh, said that that came from a white person because I feel like as a black person, I would say my ancestors, not the ancestors.
Okay. Did you get that?
Hmm.
Explain it, please.
No, no, it's just the words. We usually say, my grandmother or my ancestors, and you kind of know. But when you talk about the ancestors, it sounds like something that somebody else would say. It's not as personal than saying my ancestors.
Well, I kind of got that to mean if you're talking about something that occurred that is really your ancestors, for example, uh, making America rich or wealthy, definitely would be my ancestors because all of the free slave labor and so forth was a big influence, a factor in that occurring. So I don't know exactly why Sister Deborah used that way, but if you're the statement I gave was the ancestors did whatever, and we have a problem today. Um, that would be assuming sole blame to say my ancestors did whatever, and we have a problem today. I don't remember exactly how I worded, but that was very close to it. So that was why I asked that question. It was to imply that if you look at this problem, some would say it's either neither a black nor white problem. Today it isn't, but back then it definitely was a black problem because we were the ones with the problem. White folks was the problem. And I shouldn't say not all of them, but for the most part, that was the problem. But I understand what she's saying. To say my ancestors, depending on how you and when you use that word, in the example I gave, I definitely wouldn't have said mine because sitting there stating that we have this problem because of the ancestors. But I guess if you look at it from a perspective, we as a people have this problem. It still wouldn't be called. I guess you could look at it that way. But either way, I guess I should have caught that earlier. It would have been more timely on the tail end of what we were discussing. Maybe Sister Deborah can add something in there that make it a little bit clearer. But in any case, the question was, how might ancestral knowledge influence one's belief, faith, or belief system? And we got away from that one. So let me answer that. When I look at ancestral knowledge, and I'll use the word does, and I'll speak for myself. When I look at serving a God, that God has to be something that's impressive, something that has done something that's going to cause me to respect, give him some form of glory. And when I look at the history of what took place here in America, it baffles me to this day how that was turned around. And I know it could have only happened as a result of God. So when I look at standing here at this point and where I stand and where I am and how I got here, I can't help but have a strong faith and belief system. So I can own, and that faith and belief system is what it is because of that ancestral knowledge, knowing what they had to persevere, where they had to come from, and what they had to come through. That's what gives me uh, the faith or level of faith that I have. So ancestral knowledge, if we know how far we've come, then we can't help but serve or believe in the God that brought us thus far. Okay, Lady Antoinette.
Hmm. Oh, nothing else. You ready?
Okay, you did answer that one, right?
Hmm.
Okay, let's go. Gonna let you go first.
Hmm.
You've been going first all along, haven't you? Compare or
Hmm.
contrast ancestral knowledge and racism.
Hmm. Well, we mentioned a little while ago about the being segregated on Sunday mornings, and my thought was that it was due to racism. And as far as knowing about your ancestral knowledge doesn't um, doesn't mean that you are racist. It just means you want to know more about who you are and where you came from. So having that knowledge, having that information that's been passed down through the generations, acknowledging that, acknowledging where you've come from, how you got here, where your family started, where they ended up. All of that information is what it is. It's information that everyone should actually know. It's your family's ancestral knowledge, and because you know that, I think though they're contrasted. Racism is something totally different. Racism is something that you hold against a person because of who they are. You consider them to be at a lesser value, or um, think that they are not as privileged as some because of who they are. But I don't think they're the same at all. They are, to me, contrasted.
Hmm. When you say you don't think they're the same at all, you don't think they have nothing in common?
Your ancestral knowledge and racism.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think they are. No, not that they don't have anything in common. Um, the racism was because of who we are, but not that because you choose to know your ancestral knowledge doesn't consider you a racist. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Okay, yeah, okay, I got you now.
So that's what I was trying to say.
And that was P.E. Johnson. Her comment is what?
I'm working on Eatman genealogy.
All right. All right. That's going to be something there, isn't it? Eatman genealogy. Okay. Now, when I look at this topic, and welcome P.E. Johnson, cousin, family. Um, when I look at this here, compare or contrast ancestral knowledge and racism. When I look at the two, I think that they are, in a sense, that they're similar
Hmm.
because they both should serve to motivate a person.
Hmm.
One, it serves to motivate an individual, and they perform or deal with it in a negative manner because they place their race above another race. But in order to do that, you have to know something about your race and actually the other race. Racism, if a person who is racist is threatened by another race, that means that they would have to know enough about themselves and the other race. Whereas ancestral knowledge requires a person to be knowledgeable concerning their ancestors. And if you're knowledgeable concerning your ancestors, you're going to know their history. So let's look at racism again. Racism deals with the two, where one has a fear of or anger of with or whatever with the other. Ancestral knowledge deals with one, you are where you are, and along the way here was this person here along the way as well. So they both deal with knowledge. A person can't be a racist unless he's knowledgeable of something enough to promote him to the point of being racist. A person can't be knowledgeable of their ancestors unless they have the knowledge to of their ancestors. So they are similar, but the difference is this. I have to, if I look at my ancestral knowledge, and I'm going to use the two people, black and white. If a black person looks at his ancestral knowledge, it's a journey that he's going to take him on. If a white person looks at his ancestral knowledge, it's a journey it's going to take him on. But if either of the two are races and they look at it, they're not looking at the knowledge of it. They're looking at the future and a frame of mind with it. And it's that frame of mind that's harmful. It's that frame of mind that's um, destructive. So when you get into that ism side, it is a negative. It leads to a mindset. It doesn't deal with the present. It deals with the future. Who I would like to be, where I would like to put these people. Whereas the ancestral knowledge, as I stated, we're standing at a point and we're looking back, and the question becomes, where do we go from here? That becomes the difference between the two. The where do we go is the people with the knowledge of, and they're trying to determine. Ask a racist person that and see what they tell you. They have an idea of where they want to go, and usually it's without something or some part of the other party. So though they're similar, I think there's a significant difference in the two. Any additional comments on that? If not,
Mm-mm.
okay. Next question is limiting one's history to another's historical perspective. Problem or solution? That's for the room as well. Do y'all see it as a problem or a solution in life? Limiting one's history to another's historical perspective. If you limit your history based on someone else's historical perspective, is that a problem or a solution? You still thinking, Lady Antoinette?
Oh, you did. Okay. So, I think that would be a problem. Limiting my history to someone else's historical perspective would be a problem because I would get, I think, what I would get the perspective of what they um, think my history is instead of uh, what my history is not.
Mhm.
So that would be a problem. I wouldn't limit my history to anybody's perspective. That's all they can give me is their perspective. But there's a whole story somewhere, and we've just got to uncover that whole story.
Okay. I like that. We want to welcome the Bishop T. Michael Dupree. He says to expand on your question. Okay. The question says limiting one's history. In other words, if I'm studying my history and I come upon um, a person's view of my history, or if I think about some of the things I've heard about my people and I limit my history of my people to what I have been told or criticized as being a told I was um, historically. Is that a problem or a solution? We're going to wait on his answer. And
Mhm.
Bishop, I'm still trying to get you on here with us. 'Cause I know your answers are really deep, and that's I like the places you come from when we have questions. And for those of you while we're waiting on the bishop's answer, I want you all to realize that we aren't here as subject matter experts. This isn't a program where we invite scholars. We'd love to have them; they're more than welcome. But it's a program where we are inspiring, at a minimum, educating, if at all possible, and I pray motivating those who watch, because there's a lot of knowledge out there. Even this question right here is all about knowledge. What someone tells you who you are. Before you had the historical scholars, there were people who told you how human you were, not necessarily you, but your ancestors. There were all sort of reasons to prolong slavery. There was all sort of reasons that people who had family members that might have somehow questioned something, that they were given an answer that was supposed to suffice while the institution went on as it went on. So there is some views, and that's what I'm getting at. There are some views that have been put out there, and to base our history on those views, is that a problem or a solution?
Hmm.
Lady Antoinette, what was the for?
I mean, I was just saying, as in a way of saying, yeah,
Hmm.
I saw it as a problem. So, because I wouldn't try to base my history off someone else's historical perspective unless they were part of my ancestry and they were trying to help me and give me some perspective on what was going on.
I love that comment, Lady Antoinette. And if you think about it, there were some people who had mindsets that were adapted. They conformed to slavery. They had a what they would call a slave mindset.
Hmm.
And I could imagine those people discouraging those who sought to bring about a change. Can you imagine how much discouragement Dr. King must have faced in his lifetime
Hmm.
with all the difference he chose to make?
Right.
Okay. Here's our response. Go ahead and read that.
We're looking at it more as a solution because when we learn of our history, we are to use that to catapult us to achieve and move further.
Okay.
Okay.
And I that is a good point he makes,
Mhm.
but um, I think he may be referring to the fact that the history that they're giving us is adequate.
Mhm.
Whereas oftentimes, there's a lot of people today that are writing curriculums to teach a Black history, actually Black people. But before that, there are people that wrote history that were off base, that it
Mhm.
was just covered with racism and all sort of things that defined who we were, that we were only a percentage of a man. That's why we didn't have a vote for so long. Those histories that they gave, those were problems, and that if we limit ourselves based on that, that's a problem.
Mhm.
But if we do not limit ourselves to that, then we can move on beyond that. But the intent of a person limiting themselves to that, and this was the question, limiting one's history to another's historical perspective. So the perspective that they gave would be their thoughts. But I fully get what my brother is saying. We're looking at it more as a solution, because when we learn of our history, we are to use that to catapult us to achieve and move farther. So, um, taught properly, I agree 100%. Now, one thing I want to introduce here is this. Sister Antoinette, you saw that, right? What Sister Deborah said, she agreed with Lady Antoinette
Mhm.
100%. All
Yes.
right. She's going to ride with you,
Thank
ride or
you.
die. But, when you look at history, no matter what a person was told, if you ever heard this statement, they could write history any way they want, and it wouldn't make a difference. This statement just it simply says that you got to be twice as good as white folks. That wasn't a well-known statement when I was coming up. I heard it listening to some elders speak, and they were talking about how they exceed or why they excel. And some people might say, well, that sounds racist. No, it doesn't. A person has to have something to motivate them to be all they can be. Now, here's another statement that doesn't sound racist, but people might have a problem with it. He who gets behind in a race must forever remain behind or run faster than the man in front. How can I tell my son or my daughter that they are behind, and while you're so busy trying to rub shoulders with and define yourself by this person, that you're missing out on your opportunity to become equal to that person? Because, in other words, what we see, we've arrived, but in reality, we're behind. And I use the analogy of a racetrack. When I was in the military, we had a PT test, and you always were timed, and you scored based on how well your time was. And it was so encouraging to have somebody there to talk to while you was running. So somebody come from the rear, and this person come up here, and you wonder, where did this guy come from? That guy has lapped you one time, even though he's right there at your side, because he came all the way around the track to come catch you. So while you're there busy running your mouth talking to him, this guy's ahead of you. So that statement, when I put it in perspective like that, I can't just run with you. I got to try to run ahead of you. And if we run like that, we may not um, catch up, but we sure as hell aren't going to stay behind. You got to have something to aim for. It's like that, aim for the moon and you'll land among the stars, or something like that.
Mhm.
You have to be able to see and understand those things. When I hear words like that, it eliminates other people's perspective, because it ain't even about what the book says now. It's about the people around me. It's about it becomes personal. And I think it's little things like that that helps where we are lacking in the knowledge. We may not be able to be catapulted by knowing that um, somebody in my family did this, and I know that if that person's did it, if a member of my family did it, I can do it too. I may
Mhm.
not know that, but I'm still motivated by the fact that I got to work twice as hard. I got to run twice as fast. I got to be twice as good. Those are the type things there that served a generation.
Mhm.
And if we haven't heard that, it's a shame on our parents. But if our children haven't heard it, it's a shame on us. Or is it? My people perish for lack of knowledge. Prime example. Additional comments, Lady Antoinette?
Mm-mm.
Oh, here's we got one more comment here. It says, go ahead.
When we get erroneous information of our history, it is up to us to investigate, research for ourselves to know the truth. Yes,
Amen, amen, amen.
I agree.
And so that becomes the problem if it's erroneous, and that's the solution.
Mhm.
Search it out.
Amen.
We that's what that goes back to what I was saying earlier. No lie can live forever unless it's accepted and nobody searches it out. But normally truth crushed to earth will rise again. Thank you, my brother. Thank you so very much. All right, Lady Antoinette.
All right. Our next one is our query question.
And our query question is this: which of the following are issues with teaching history? And I just alluded to this earlier. When it comes down to teaching history, when it comes down to teaching history, which of these issues are issues with teaching history? One, it reveals our past. Two, it reveals one's innocence or guilt. Three, it holds one accountable. It holds one accountable. Four, it assigns responsibility. All right, room, everyone in the discussion room. Which of the following are issues with teaching history? Which of these are problems with teaching history? It reveals one past. It reveals one's innocence or guilt. It holds one accountable. It assigns responsibility. Lady Antoinette.
So you say which of the following are issues or problems, right? With teaching history?
hmm I left the word issues,
Okay.
but you can add problems. They're kind of
Okay.
synonymous there.
Well, um, I don't know. I guess I would look at this as the issues would be that it would reveal one's past, it would hold one accountable, it would assign responsibility. I think 1, 3, and 4.
Okay, Lady Antoinette says one, three, and four. All right, you all. What are your answers? Lady Antoinette,
Mhm.
was that your explanation as well?
Yeah, well, no. No. Um, when I say it would reveal one's well, we know what that is. Everything is kind of self-explanatory, you know. It
Mm-hmm.
would reveal the past. Hopefully, it would reveal the truth about the past.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in revealing the truth about the past, it would hold someone accountable for not um, holding those truths or bringing those truths to the forefront. Instead, they wanted to hide the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then it would also assign, well, who was responsible for this? Who was accountable and who was responsible?
Okay.
So,
Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and give mine. When I look at this, I look at it from this perspective. The issues, if you're going to teach history, there's going to be some issues, good, bad, and different
Mhm.
issues. What can we expect to achieve? Issues. What will be some of the problems we're going to face? Issues. So I'm just looking at it from that perspective. And I would say one for sure, in that it reveals one's past. History is going to reveal the past. That's when we just talked about the comment about the, I look at it in sons of slaves and sons of slave owners, former slaves and former slave owners. That kind of narrows the black and white of it here in the United States. And you look at number two, it reveals one's innocent or guilt. And I would say it doesn't really make me innocent because of what my past was, nor does it make me guilty. It doesn't make my associate or brother whose father or parents might have been different roles in history than my own, because that individual wasn't there. I wasn't there, but it does educate us. Number three, it holds one accountable. When you know history, you're accountable for what you know. It's like a person that's makes a racist comment who is not racist. You can't define determine a person's is racist by the statement they make. As I stated, some of the things I'm saying now could be someone come back and say, "Oh, he's promoting hate." Far from it. I'm just trying to speak truth. So I wouldn't say it holds one accountable. Well, actually, I would. You're accountable now for knowing, but it doesn't mean that you. I guess number four, it doesn't mean you're responsible for what took place, but you are accountable now that you know. So now that you know, you're accountable. Do you have any responsibility? I wasn't even born then. So I'm gonna let you off on the responsibility one. I'm gonna let you off on the guilt. So I'm gonna go with one and three.
Mhm.
And I was hoping that we got some input from the room, but I guess maybe that question lacks a degree of clarity. So, but what do you think of my one and three, Lady Antoinette?
Well, I understand you're 1 and 3. I mean, that's why I chose those, but as far as assigning responsibility, when you're looking at, when I look at the responsibility part, when we look at the history that's been taught, and somewhere along the way, someone had to be responsible for compiling the information.
Mm-hmm.
Someone was held accountable for getting that information. So not only does it hold someone accountable, but it should hold someone responsible as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, this person you know held them accountable for getting the information, but you are responsible for making sure that this information was the best information. So, and it was not. So both of you kind of fell down on your jobs. So now we've got history that and see and so that's why I was stating, I chose number 4
Mm-hmm.
because someone has to be responsible for the information that went out,
Okay.
held accountable and responsible for the information that went out. Now, as far as the teaching, I've heard 2 or 3 I've heard 2 different, reasons that have been given for them taking out American history out of the curriculum of schools. One was that the children are not tested on American history, so because they're not tested on it, they don't need to have the class.
Okay.
That was one. Another was because of the different truths that have come to the forefront that children are asking questions about and finding out about, that somewhere they didn't want the white children to feel bad in teaching the truth about American history. Now, I don't know which one is true, but those are two different reasons I have learned about why they don't teach American history. So um, I guess it didn't matter to us if we felt bad about them teaching about the Civil War and the slave trade and all of that, you know. So, uh, in looking at things like that, you can still see that there is a great deal of disparity among the school systems.
Okay. All righty. Looking at the question and what you just gave, uh, I think we answered two different questions. You answered from a perspective of the person teaching and getting preparing the lesson, and I answer from a perspective of the information going forth and the person. I answer as the recipient, the person being taught.
Mhm,
You answer from perspective of the person preparing to present or give the information.
mhm.
So that just want to clarify that so I can relate to your answers. And Sister Deborah took the smart route. Sister Deborah said,
She was gonna wait on me. She says, I'm struggling with this one. So I'm just going to listen and take the information coming from the others.
okay. So
Amen.
that was a smart move. And we have Bishop T. Michael Dupree.
Bishop said one, two, and three.
Okay, I was about to got a typo there. Bishop. Hold on a second. Bishop said what?
One, two, and three.
Okay. Let me just add that. I want to make sure. I like to give people credit for their. Okay, why do you think he said one, two, and three, Lady Antoinette?
Well, I think we all chose number one for the same reason. Um, and number two, it reveals one's innocence or guilt. Um, and now we would have to find out whose innocence or guilt. Is he talking, like you said, your perspective came from the person being taught. My perspective came from the person who was doing the teaching. So, which perspective would he be looking at when it would reveal one's innocence or guilt?
Well, I
And
could actually see that um, because he doesn't isn't able to speak on it. If you think about the concept of what has happened, if it's somebody's fault or there's a guilty party, if someone stood accused, you could actually, knowing the history, it would reveal one's innocent or guilt. It says history best rewards all research, so it would definitely, for someone looking to find that out, you'd be tasked with the same study as you would someone who was preparing to give the class, or in my situation, someone who had gave it and how what you determined from it. But now that he's shared number two, I can I can relate to it more because historically people like to say, "Well, you were," or something like that to kind of justify the length of duration of and so forth.
mhm,
So that would kind of reveal one's innocent or guilt. Why did you prolong this so long? Why did it last this long? And especially, when civil rights was going on and things were on the television, that was thought to be one of the major influences in civil rights, the fact that people could now see what was going on in the United States. So that made a big difference. It actually um, showed or revealed the guilt.
Mhm.
So actually, TV did that. And Sister Crystal says racial disparity is one reason why they don't want it to be taught.
Mhm.
Uh, have you heard that one, Lady Antoinette? Because I would love to hear kind of her a little bit more about that. But I think that, and actually, I was actually studying to do a paper on the difficulty of teaching, and it was actually I started out with African, Black American history in elementary schools, grade 1 through 6. And I had an instructor who thought that that was not enough material written on that. I thought that was funny because here I was writing material that would have been available to the next person, but I was asked to change it because there wasn't enough material available for me to gather from someone else. Never mind the study I was going to do from someone else to validate my doing the study. But in any case, there's a lot of things or reasons. But one of the things I discovered in my research was that the teachers that actually teach and taught history and a couple of other what they call sensitive subjects, they had a problem when teaching them because oftentimes the people that are teaching now are the ones that who were not taught this. So when they actually have to teach it to others, just as Lady Antoinette alluded to, they have to learn it. And when they learn it, most are uncomfortable with teaching it because of the blame that my brother just identified. So when you look at it from that perspective there, you can see the problem with it. But on the other hand, there was a study done by it was a white female at the University of Alabama in schools there, and what she found was that most of the subjects that were taught concerning history, that the teachers teaching it were not adequately trained to teach it, and nor were they comfortable with teaching it. So her uh, comment was that there needed to be more studies done on other subjects, and when that opened the door to it, but yet that guy wanted to make sure that it wasn't open any wider. But in any case, the people that are teaching, they have a problem with teaching certain subjects because of the fact that it didn't affect them. They weren't a part of it. They've disassociated. So now that it's not being taught, just as those people are disassociated, that's going to leave our youth disassociate. So that mindset that they are taught that it doesn't need to be taught. If imagine if that prevails and it's going to be known and it's going to be taught, and every time that question comes up, the answer is going to be, well, it's not tested. Uh, when we were in school, we were lazy already, so we didn't want that class. So from that viewpoint, as the youth, no, we don't want that class. That's additional study. But at the same time, look at what we're missing out on. And the other thing I just want y'all to think about this, and this was a great point. It went back and it studied. There were certain groups that were responsible for studying to see how far civil rights had come, see how far legislation had come. And what they found was that uh, it was needed to change the mind or influence the future leaders of tomorrow. Because if a person was exposed to what the injustices were, they'd have a knowledge of it. And if they were had a knowledge of it, in that somehow was in their senses, it would come into play if ever they got into office and had to make decisions concerning what affected the people as a whole. It was thought they'd be less likely to do it from a prejudiced perspective. But even with all of that history, all those reports, all those findings, we were still more concerned with how people felt while teaching the topic, and how great of a problem or discomfort it creates in knowing that our children are actually being exposed to certain knowledge. But I would ask, which is more harmful, them being exposed to the truth or being deprived of it? Because there's a saying, a person that don't know their history, they're doomed to repeat it. Sister Deborah shares, very informative, Minister Jamie. Thank you, Sister Deborah.
Amen.
Um, that should have got me my past my little committee, but it wouldn't have. I don't think there was a lot more involved. But thank you, Sister Deborah. That information I just shared with you all is research that I did myself. So that portion is valid. All right, Lady Antoinette.
Okay.
This is our Do You Have a Minute, which was our elevator ride before. I felt it wasn't fair. Nobody seemed to want to let the person off the elevator. So we're going to have Do You Have a Minute? Do you have a minute? Person says every year they talk about the same people for Black History discussion. Lady Antoinette.
Well, 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 well. Um, I would ask that person, are you ready to make some new people for us to talk about? Are you willing to become one of those new persons who are going to spearhead something that we can talk about in the coming years for Black history? Um, yeah, we talk about the same people because we need new heroes. We need new people to step up, to arise and shine and be on the rise, so we can get some new stories to tell, some new people to talk about, some new movers and shakers in Black history, in our um, for our people. So
Mhm. All right. Well said. Well said. Question being, are do you have a minute? Person says every year they talk about the same people for Black history. And I would point out to him, yeah, that may be, but by the same token, um, the people that aren't being talked about are the ones that are making history. Maybe you should share some of the things you've accomplished with them. And I will leave him with that. And the reason that I would word it that way is because when we go through something, we use something as a topic or a subject. Whether we're using Dr. King, whether we're using Mandela, whether we are, because of what we are using or who we are using, it really isn't about the person. It's about what it was that they were teaching. When we can only remember Dr. King had a dream, Dr. King was a visionary. And if you can get that vision, write the vision, make it plain so that those who read it can run with it, then we will understand why that person is the one that's taught. It doesn't make a difference, but there's something that we need to be instilling more than cutting out someone's the bust or their shape, their heads, or some semblance of them, and talking about it in Black history. It's deeper than that. And if we can convey that to those people that would ask that question, then maybe they'll realize that they haven't done their part because education concerning Black History Month isn't limited to Black History Month. I love the way this worked out. I kept saying last program, this is not a Black history. This is not Black history, and here we are into March doing the second half of it, which is fitting. So it just goes to show we're not talking Black history here. We're talking ancestral knowledge. And as we talk ancestral knowledge, we aren't just reviewing history or talking about past history. We're here discussing something in the present. So as we make history in the future, we may have something that's going to influence our decisions or our actions. So that's my spiel. I think, did we share this?
No, we haven't.
Okay.
Sister Deborah writes, okay, and your point is what? I'm open to any suggestions that you may have.
Cons- uh, Go ahead.
And
Uh,
Sister Apostle Crystal says, we need to take our children to the Black History museums and expose them to their history. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Sister Deborah says, I'm sorry, I sometimes have a tendency to be a little sarcastic. Sister Deborah, welcome to your brother. So welcome to your brother.
Sister Deborah, there's nothing wrong with making comments that leave them thinking. And if they see it as sarcastic, once they get the wrapper off of it, they'll have something they'll be able to deal with. So you good. You good. All right. Anything else from the room?
That's it, it seems.
Anything else? Oh, I found it. I found this. I wanted to share this with you all. And this is my I forgot the term to use. Disclaimer. And actually it's not a disclaimer. I'm not even gonna do that. I just want to share this with you all. And it reads, you are not alone. You never have been. It's just that you're always looking out and never within. No, the world won't love you. It never did and never will. See, the world has nothing to offer, but you have everything to give. My child, hope is a lantern and faith is a light. You must hold on to both of them if you are to survive the night. The world is a dark place. It gets cold sometimes. But look within for the warmth of the light of your mind. Look to me, for I am truly alive and well, just as you were before you were born to live. I am your roots, the seeds from which spring family trees. I am in every branch. I am the bark, and I am in every leaf. I was you before you were, and now you are me. I am your past, just as you are the present for me. We have come here together for those who are yet to be. When my life seemed hopeless, all I could do was look to you. You were my lantern of hope. You gave me strength to endure. So now, my child, it's time we unite as one. See, there's a race before you that only you can run. Be encouraged, my child, as you take the baton. You must be swift and wise, and remember to always look inside. For years I have been silent, but never again. Now that we have found each other, let the race begin. Take the baton, knowing that I am at your side, and nothing can hold you back when you are on the rise. That poem is titled Ancestral Knowledge. And when it was written, it was an awakening that I didn't get here. where I am alone. There was so many that came before me. There were so many things that they did do, so many things they failed to do, so many things they came through, so many things they had to get through. And here stand I, holding the baton representing all those people. We need to realize that no matter how well we know our knowledge, how uninformed we are as it pertains to it, we have a past, but it is nowhere near as important as the future that lay ahead of us. And we are the ones that are making history. So I want to encourage you all, do your part, educate, motivate, and inspire. Together we rise. Yes, Lady Antoinette, that was my Emmy moment.
Amen. Sister Deborah says, Amen. I love that. Amen. Amen. All right. For my Emmy moment, I would just like to uh, give an inspirational word to you who are listening and viewing, and those of you who have joined us. The word tells us to be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God. This is coming from a spiritual perspective. We are the heirs to the kingdom of God, no matter what race, creed, or color. As long as we do what is right in the eyes of God, as long as we are obedient in the eyes of God, as long as we toe the rope, do all that's expected in the eyes of God, then when we all come before him, he will not judge us on our color. He will not judge us on our ancestry. He will not judge us on our creed. He will judge us on how obedient we were to him and the praises that we lifted up to him, and if we loved our neighbor as we loved ourselves, no matter what color or ancestry. Peace and blessings. Thank you. With that being said, I'd like to take the time to thank those in our conversation room. Sister Deborah, thank you so much for being here with us. And we pray that your family is doing much better. We did lift you up in prayer the other day when you had to leave. And we do hope that you went back to look at that video and saw that we were in prayer for you. Apostle Crystal Harris, thank you as well, my sister, for joining us as usual. We do have our loyal listeners and the people who are in our conversation room every week to just chime in on the various topics. We thank Bishop Dupree for joining us. I think he comes in late because he may have a Bible study or something prayer meeting or Bible study that goes on Wednesday evenings. Possibly. So he comes in whenever he gets in, he comes in. We'd like to also thank P.E. Johnson's, Paula, Cookie Johnson. Cousin, thank you so much for Pauline. I'm sorry, Cookie Johnson thank you, cousin, for joining us and listening in with us as well. And also we had Sister um, um, Joanne Ramirez. She was with us. I don't know how long she stayed, but we thank you, Sister Ramirez, for also tuning in. And we want to tell you all to tune in on next Wednesday, 8 p.m. sharp, for another broadcast of Rise to Prosperity. I like to thank my co-host, and husband, Minister Jamie, for being with us this evening. All of you who are listening via Rise Radio, otr.com. Thank you for joining us. So, with that being said, beloved, our hope is that you prosper and be in good health as you rise above your situation or circumstances. Peace and blessings be unto you all.